The medical bay aboard the Zaltaran flagship was silent except for the steady hum of life support systems. High Physician Vrelick stood over the human's body, his 4 eyes scanning the biometric readings one last time. Flatlined. No neurological activity. No pulse. "It is unfortunate," he sighed, turning to his assistants. "Mark the human as deceased." The alien medics bowed their heads in solemn agreement. Human Lieutenant Daniel Carter had succumbed to injuries sustained in battle, his fragile physiology unable to endure the trauma. Though humanity had a reputation for resilience, even their bodies had limits. The ship's captain was informed. A message was prepared for Earth, expressing condolences. The body was placed in stasis, awaiting proper repatriation. Then, 3 days later, the impossible happened. Daniel Carter sat up. His first thought was, "Why am I so hungry?" His second thought was drowned out by the piercing screams of the medical staff. Chapter 1. Death is just an inconvenience. The moment the heart monitor flatlined, a hush fell over the alien medical ward. A team of 4 Zalari medics, tall, spindly beings with bioluminescent skin, stood frozen in shock. The human was dead. There was no mistaking it. His body lay motionless on the examination table, his skin pale, his lips slightly parted as if caught mid-breath. Dr. Zarn, the lead physician, turned to the others. "Mark the time of death." Human designation, Sergeant Daniel Reeves. Cause, catastrophic organ failure due to extreme trauma. His voice, usually measured and professional, carried an undercurrent of unease. "Do we contact his people?" One of the younger medics, Vethel, asked hesitantly. "The Alliance requires we notify the nearest human representative." Dr. Zarn hesitated. He had worked with humans before, treated them for burns, fractures, even the occasional toxic exposure. But never had he been responsible for declaring one dead. "Yes," he said finally. "Initiate the protocol. They must retrieve the body." As the medics prepared the necessary paperwork and contacted the human liaison, the body of Daniel Reeves lay undisturbed, his chest unmoving, his vitals non-existent. But even in death, something felt off. Chapter 2. Against all biological logic. 3 days later, when the human corpse sat up, the Zalari medical ward plunged into chaos. Dr. Zarn had been reviewing autopsy data when a shriek split the air. Rushing into the morgue, he found a scene that defied all logic. Sergeant Daniel Reeves, very much not dead, groggily pulling himself into a sitting position. "What the hell?" Reeves muttered, rubbing his temples. His voice was hoarse, as if his throat had been dry for days. Dr. Zarn's limbs trembled. "Impossible, we confirmed your death. Your body, your organs, your brain activity, it was all gone." Reeves blinked at him blearily. "Well, Doc, I'm feelin' pretty alive right now. So either you made a mistake, or I'm some kind of zombie." The Zalari medics clustered near the entrance, whispering in frantic, clicking syllables. This was beyond their comprehension. No species in the known galaxy had ever come back from total biological death without extreme medical intervention, and certainly not after 3 days. Dr. Zarn hesitated before stepping forward. "Sergeant Reeves, what do you last remember?" Reeves frowned, thinking. Explosion.
Pain.
Then nothing. Just black. Until I woke up here. Zarn exchanged glances with his staff. "Sergeant, do you feel normal? Any pain?" "Any." He cut himself off. What was he even supposed to ask a dead man? Reeves rolled his shoulders, wincing. "Feel like I've been hit by a freighter, but otherwise, yeah." Zarn took a slow, measured breath, his bioluminescent skin shifting to an anxious shade of deep violet. "Sergeant Reeves, you were clinically dead. There is no medical precedent for this. Your biology should not allow it." Reeves smirked weakly. "Hate to break it to you, Doc, but human biology doesn't exactly play by the rules." Chapter 3. The Impossible Patient. Dr. Vierax stood motionless, his primary and secondary eyes fixed on the human who should have been nothing more than a lifeless corpse. Every scan, every test, every physiological indicator had confirmed it. The human, Lieutenant Ethan Hayes, was dead. And yet, here he was, sitting up on the examination table, rubbing his temples as if he had merely awoken from a deep sleep. What the hell?" Ethan muttered, his voice hoarse. He looked around the medical bay, his brow furrowing. "Where am I?" The Arax took a cautious step forward, his tendrils twitching in apprehension. "You are in the Zalarian Medical Center aboard the Galactic Concorde flagship." He hesitated before adding, "You were declared deceased 3 days ago." Ethan blinked. "That's gotta be some kind of mistake." "There is no mistake," the Arax said, his voice tight. "Your body was cold. No neural activity. No cardiac function. No cellular regeneration." Ethan swung his legs over the table and stretched, wincing as his joints popped. "Well, Doc, I'm feeling pretty alive right now." The Arax activated his scanner and hesitantly ran it over Ethan's body. The readings were absurd. Cellular regeneration was off the charts, and neural activity was abnormally high. There were traces of necrotic tissue in his bloodstream, but it was rapidly breaking down and being replaced by healthy cells. "This is impossible," the Arax muttered. "Your body was in a state of total biological failure." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, well, humans are tough." "No," the Arax corrected, shaking his head. "This is beyond toughness. This defies every principle of medical science." The door to the medbay hissed open, and Captain Zilvran stormed in, his crest of iridescent scales flaring. His voice was sharp. "Dr. Vierax, explain." The Arax struggled for words.
"He was dead."
"He is now alive." Zilvran turned to Ethan. "Lieutenant Hayes, do you recall anything? Anything at all about what happened?" Ethan's expression darkened. He closed his eyes and took a slow breath. "Last thing I remember, I was on the orbital station. There was an explosion. Hull breach. I got sucked into vacuum," his brow furrowed. "And then nothing. Just darkness." The Arax exchanged a glance with Zilvran. "That aligns with our records. Your body was recovered floating in open space. No life support. No oxygen. You should have suffered complete cellular degradation." Ethan stood up, rolling his shoulders. "Yeah, well, I didn't. And now I'm starving. You guys got any food?" Chapter 4. What are you? Ethan sat in the mess hall, shoveling food into his mouth like a man starved for weeks. Around him, the crew members whispered, eyes darting toward him in a mixture of fear and curiosity. "You're sure you're all right?" the Arax asked, watching him closely. Ethan swallowed a bite of what vaguely tasted like mashed potatoes. "Other than being really hungry?"
"Yeah."
He paused. "You guys are making this a bigger deal than it is." The Arax's tendrils twitched. "No, Lieutenant. We are making this the precise level of a deal that it should be. You defy death. That is not a trivial matter." Ethan sighed and set his fork down. "Look, I appreciate the concern, but humans have a history of bouncing back from crazy stuff." Zilvran tapped his claws on the table. "Not like this. Not from total systemic failure." Ethan leaned back. "All right, Doc. What's your theory?" The Arax hesitated before answering. "Some form of rapid cellular regeneration. It exceeds even the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. The fact that your body restarted itself, that your brain function returned after total cessation, it suggests a biological mechanism we do not understand." Ethan exhaled. "So, what? I'm some kind of freak now?" Zilvran's gaze was sharp.
"No."
"But you may be something more than what even your own species understands." The room fell silent as Ethan absorbed that. Then he let out a small chuckle.
"Well,
that's something." He picked up his fork again. "Guess we'll figure it out." The Arax exchanged a glance with Zilvran. Figure it out? That was an understatement. They had never encountered anything like this in the history of the Galactic Concorde. And if humans had this ability without even realizing it, then the entire galaxy had just changed forever. Chapter 5. The Ghost of the Medbay. 3 days had passed since Daniel Torrin had walked out of the morgue, very much alive despite the death certificate signed by the alien medics. The news of his resurrection spread like wildfire through the station. Some called it a medical miracle. Others whispered that the human had become some sort of ghost. But to Daniel, it was just another day in his absurd life. You're telling me you felt your body shutting down? Dr. Rajik, a Zelvari medic, asked him as she scanned his vitals for the third time that morning. Daniel shrugged. I don't know how to explain it. 1 second I was out. No heartbeat. No breathing. Then everything just clicked back on. Like rebooting a computer. The Zelvari medic rubbed the side of her face in frustration. That shouldn't be possible. Yeah, well, here I am, Daniel said, stretching his arms. Honestly, I feel fine. Better than fine, actually. Rajik muttered something in her native language that Daniel assumed was an expletive. Human biology defies so many of our medical understandings. The fact that you could recover from total systemic shutdown with no lasting damage, it's beyond impossible. You should be used to humans breaking the rules by now, Daniel teased. The doors to the medbay hissed open, and Captain Varek stormed inside, his mandibles clicking in agitation.
Torin.
What in the name of the void is going on? Good morning to you too, Cap, Daniel said, smirking. You're looking extra pissed off today. Do you have any idea what kind of chaos your so-called death has caused? The Galactic Council is investigating our medical practices. Conspiracy theories are flooding the station. Some of my crew refuse to even look at you, convinced you're some kind of undead monstrosity. Daniel snorted. Oh, come on. That's ridiculous. Varek's secondary eyes twitched. One of the engineers tried to sprinkle salt on you. Daniel blinked. All right, that's pretty funny. Rajik sighed. The only way to put this to rest is to run more tests. We need to know why this happened. Daniel groaned.
Fine.
But if you start poking me with anything bigger than a needle, I'm out. Varek crossed his arms. Oh, I wouldn't worry. If I had my way, you'd already be in quarantine until we were sure you weren't a danger to the rest of the crew. Daniel smirked. Love you too, Cap. Chapter 6. The Death That Wasn't. The tests dragged on for hours. Scans, blood work, reflex examinations, everything Dr. Rajik could think of. But the results were just as baffling as before. Daniel's vitals were too perfect, his cellular activities strangely accelerated, as if his body had adapted to dying and coming back stronger. Rajik stared at the results. This shouldn't be happening. It's like your body reinforced itself after dying. There's no cellular decay, no neural degradation. If anything, you're healthier than before. Daniel frowned. Are you saying I got some kind of bonus life from dying? The medic exhaled sharply. I don't know what to say, Torin. Your biology doesn't follow standard medical logic. Before Daniel could respond, the medbay doors opened again, this time revealing 2 figures in dark, formal uniforms. Galactic Council agents. The taller one, a reptilian Jorvan, stepped forward. Daniel Torin, we need to speak with you. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Did I do something illegal? You died, the Jorvan said flatly. And then you came back. That is a matter of great concern. Rajik scowled. He's not an anomaly to be studied like some lab experiment. The shorter agent, a pale-skinned Atrelian, narrowed her eyes. Actually, Doctor, he might be exactly that. We've reviewed the records. Your team declared him clinically dead. By all medical standards, he should not be standing here. And yet he is. That means one of 2 things. Either you made a catastrophic medical error, or humans have abilities we don't fully understand. Daniel whistled.
Wow.
You make it sound like I'm a security threat. You might be, the Jorvan replied. Varek growled. Torin is a member of my crew. If you're suggesting taking him into custody... We're suggesting nothing yet, the Atrelian interrupted. But the Galactic Council takes biological anomalies very seriously. If humans have undiscovered regenerative abilities, this could have major consequences. Daniel crossed his arms. And what if I just want to go back to work and pretend this never happened? The 2 agents exchanged glances before the Jorvan finally spoke. That is not an option. Rajik's mandibles flared. You can't just take him. He hasn't committed any crime. The Atrelian sighed. Doctor, we're not here to arrest him. But we are here to investigate. If humans can survive death, we need to understand how. And if there's any risk to the rest of the galaxy, we need to know that too. Daniel groaned. So what? You're gonna poke me with needles and ask me invasive questions for the next few weeks? More or less, the Jorvan admitted. Daniel shook his head and sighed.
Great.
Just another normal day in the life of a human. Chapter 7. The Impossible Recovery. Dr. Zalrek stared at the biometric monitors in disbelief. Human patient Ethan Graves had flatlined 3 days ago. Every test had confirmed his death. Zero neural activity, no circulatory function, complete biological shutdown. And yet, here he was, sitting up in the hospital bed, stretching as if waking from an afternoon nap. "Explain this to me," Zalrek demanded, his voice wavering as he turned to Nurse Vrina. "Sir, we don't know." Vrina's plum-colored skin had paled to a sickly lavender, her mandibles clicking nervously. His tissues were undergoing necrosis. Then, somehow, cellular activity restarted. It's as if his body simply rebooted. Ethan groaned and cracked his neck.
Wow, that was weird.
"I had the strangest dreams. Kind of felt like, wait, why are you guys looking at me like that?" The room was deathly silent. Every medic, scientist, and security officer assigned to his case had frozen in place. Finally, Zalrek spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "You died human. We declared you dead. We performed post-mortem scans. Your body was shutting down irreversibly." Ethan blinked.
Huh.
"Well, I feel fine now. Got anything to eat?" The room erupted into chaos. Chapter 8. The Unexplainable Becomes a Threat. High Commander Relvith watched the footage for the third time, his tail coiling in agitation. Across the war table, various species had gathered, scientists, military officers, and medical specialists. The hollow recording displayed Ethan Graves sitting up in bed, looking completely unharmed, despite having been medically confirmed dead for 72 hours. "What does this mean?" Relvith demanded. "Have the humans lied about their biology? Are they immortal? Are they regenerating organisms? Explain." Dr. Zalrek, still visibly shaken, shook his head. "We have no answers, Commander. Human biology is unstable, adaptive. It defies all medical understanding." One of the officers, a reptilian Talviran named Koresh, slammed his clawed hand on the table. "Unacceptable. If humans can survive death, they are an existential threat. We cannot allow this to go unchecked." "Threat," a voice interrupted. The room turned to find Ethan standing at the entrance, arms crossed, a bemused expression on his face. "Now, hold on a second. I don't know what happened either, but let's not start assuming humans are some kind of undead menace, all right? Last I checked, I was still very much alive." Commander Relvitha's eyes narrowed. "That is precisely what we fear. You should be dead. And yet, here you stand. What assurance do we have that you, your entire species, are not hiding something more?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "Look, man, I get it. It freaks you out. It freaks me out too. But threatening me isn't gonna help. You want to figure this out? Good.
So do I.
But let's do it the smart way." For a long moment, the room remained silent. Then, finally, Relvith sat back and exhaled sharply.
Fine.
"We study this phenomenon. But if we discover deception, the consequences will be severe." Ethan smirked. "Sounds like a plan. Just one request. Can I get some pancakes first?" Chapter 9. Dr. Vareen stood frozen, her tendrils curling in shock as the human, who had been declared clinically dead just days before, stood before her, adjusting the standard-issue medical gown as if nothing had happened. The other medics in the room, some holding diagnostic tablets, others gripping at their surgical instruments in disbelief, remained silent. The entire ward had been thrown into disarray at the sight. Derek Carter, the deceased yet inexplicably resurrected human, glanced around the room before scratching the back of his head. "Morning," he offered, his voice dry, hoarse from lack of use. Vareen forced herself to step forward, her years of medical training warring with her instinct to run. "You were," she stopped, taking a deep breath to stabilize herself. "Mr. Carter, you were medically dead. Your vitals ceased. Your cerebral functions flatlined. We have documented proof. How are you standing here?" Derek frowned, rubbing at his temples. "I dunno. Last thing I remember, I was out on the medical table, everything hurt like hell, then nothing. Just blackness." Then I woke up a couple hours ago feeling hungry as hell. Vereen felt an uneasy prickle run down her spine. You woke up in the morgue.
Yeah.
That was, unsettling. The silence in the room stretched until Dr. Lean, one of Vereen's colleagues, tentatively stepped forward, her ocular lenses scanning Derek from head to toe. We must conduct tests. This could be a failure in our medical technology. Perhaps humans enter a state that mimics death but isn't. Or, Vereen added grimly, we misdiagnosed a species that defies our known biological parameters. Derek raised a hand. Look, before you poke and prod me, can I get some food? I feel like I haven't eaten in years. Hours later, after Derek had devoured a meal large enough to leave two of the staff stunned into silence, he sat in a diagnostics chair while the medics ran a barrage of tests. His vitals, brain activity, cell regeneration rates, all were examined meticulously. The results, however, made no sense. His cellular regeneration is absurd, Lean murmured, glancing at the display. His nervous system suffered catastrophic failure, yet it's reconstructing itself at an unprecedented rate. This level of biological restoration should be impossible. Impossible for us, perhaps, Vereen said, studying the scans. But clearly not for them. Derek shifted uncomfortably. So, am I okay? Like, am I going to drop dead again, or what? We have no idea, Vereen admitted. Chapter 10. News of Derek's revival spread like wildfire. The medical community across the galactic sector was thrown into chaos as various alien species debated what this meant for their understanding of biology. Entire research teams demanded access to Derek's data. Some feared what it implied about human resilience. Others were in awe. Derek, meanwhile, had far simpler concerns. Look, I'm grateful for the whole not being dead thing, he told Vereen, but I really need to get my stuff back. My personal data, my clothes, and, my ship? Vereen, who had spent the last few days trying to keep the growing panic among medical officials at bay, rubbed her temples. Mr. Carter, your ship was sent for salvage. It was assumed that, with your death, it was unclaimed property. Derek blinked. Wait, what?
We have procedures, she sighed.
It may still be recoverable, but we need to go through proper channels. Derek groaned.
Great.
I die for, 3 days? And in that time, you guys loot my stuff. Typical? Vereen resisted the urge to remind him that they thought he had ceased to exist permanently. As negotiations over his ship ensued, Derek found himself subject to increasing scrutiny. More than once, he'd caught scientists staring at him as though he were an anomaly to be solved. Which, to be fair, he was. But it was getting creepy. Eventually, after multiple tests, it became clear that Derek's revival wasn't a fluke. His body had, through means unknown, repaired itself. More disturbingly, the same process meant that, in theory, he could survive conditions that would kill most other beings. Congratulations, Vereen said dryly after their latest test results. You're an evolutionary nightmare. Derek chuckled. Hey, I'll take it. Now, about my ship. Chapter 11. The Awakening. James Carter sat on the hospital bed, his fingers tracing the smooth surface of his forearm where the alien monitors had once been attached. The hum of the medical bay filled the air as the alien doctors, their elongated forms shifting in agitation, whispered amongst themselves. 3 days ago, he had been declared dead by their advanced medical technology, yet here he was, alive and seemingly unchanged. But he knew something was different. His mind felt sharper, his senses heightened. He could hear the low murmur of the aliens' conversation despite them standing across the room. His vision was more detailed, every surface seemingly outlined in a faint glow. It wasn't just survival, it was transformation. Dr. Vemrak, the lead alien physician, stepped forward. This is impossible, he muttered in heavily accented English. Your species does not recover from systemic failure at such a level. Our scanners detected no life. And yet, here you stand. James hesitated before answering. He himself wasn't sure how he had come back. The last thing he remembered was darkness, then a surge of something, energy, light, rushing through his body. I don't know what happened either, he admitted. But I feel different. The aliens exchanged glances before ushering James toward an array of diagnostic machines. They ran their scans again, yet the results were the same. He was alive, but his biology had changed. His cells were regenerating at a speed previously unknown to both humans and aliens. His neural activity had increased dramatically. Then the alarms blared. Intrusion detected, a mechanical voice announced in the alien tongue. The medical bay sealed itself, and a blue shield formed around the room. James felt a sudden rush of adrenaline, but unlike before, he didn't feel fear. Instead, a strange calm settled over him, as if his body instinctively knew what to do. As the doors burst open, a group of unknown aliens in dark armor stormed in. They weren't part of the medical team. James could tell by the way the doctors shrank back. These were something else. Mercenaries, maybe. One of them pointed at James.
He is the one.
Take him. Chapter 12. The Chase. James reacted before he could think. The moment the mercenaries lunged for him, his body moved with impossible speed. He ducked, pivoted, and in a blur, he was across the room, standing behind them. The aliens hesitated for a fraction of a second, just enough time for James to grab a metallic tray and hurl it with pinpoint accuracy at the nearest attacker's head. The impact sent the alien sprawling. The others turned their weapons on him, but James was already moving, instincts kicking in as though he'd trained for this his entire life. He dodged the first energy blast, feeling the heat scorch the air behind him. Then, without thinking, he thrust his hand forward, and an invisible force erupted from his palm, sending the mercenaries flying into the far wall. The alien doctors stared in shock. James himself was stunned. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers. The energy that had surged through him when he woke up, it was still there, waiting to be tapped into. Whatever had happened during his so-called death, it had changed him at the fundamental level. Dr. Vemrak was the first to speak. "Human," he whispered, eyes wide. "You are no longer just human." James didn't have time to process that. More mercenaries were coming. He could hear the pounding of their boots down the corridor. He turned to Vemrak. "Can you get me out of here?" The doctor hesitated, then nodded. "Follow me." They dashed through the corridors, alarms blaring. James barely felt his feet touch the ground. He was moving faster than ever before, his body responding with perfect efficiency. The aliens guiding him pressed on a hidden panel, revealing a concealed exit. As James stepped through, he turned back to see Vemrak watching him with something between fear and awe. "Be careful, James Carter," the doctor warned. "You are now something the universe has never seen before. And they will come for you." With that, James disappeared into the unknown, his heart pounding with the realization that his journey was only just beginning. Chapter 13. The Awakening. The soft hum of alien machinery was the first thing John registered as he drifted back into consciousness. His body felt strangely light, as if floating in a thick, viscous fluid. His eyes fluttered open, revealing a translucent blue liquid surrounding him. Panic set in for a brief moment before a mechanical voice, smooth and devoid of emotion, spoke in a language he didn't understand. John gasped, his body lurching forward as the fluid drained away, leaving him shivering on a cold, metallic surface. A bright light above forced his eyes shut for a moment before he adjusted. His lungs burned as he took deep breaths, feeling more alive than he had in days. Or had it been weeks? He had no way of knowing. Two figures approached, their elongated forms shadowed against the sterile white light. Their skin shimmered, shifting between hues of blue and silver. Their large, pupilless eyes locked onto him with something resembling shock. "He should not be conscious," one of them said, their voice transmitted directly into his mind. John groaned, trying to push himself upright, only for his limbs to tremble under his own weight. One of the aliens pressed a floating device against his chest, scanning him with a sequence of flashing symbols. "This is impossible," the other alien murmured. "The human was clinically dead 3 days ago." John coughed and rasped. "Well, sorry to disappoint." The aliens exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. One of them pressed a button on the wall, and a circular portal slid open with a soft hiss. More of their kind entered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to deep concern. John realized he was naked, save for a thin layer of biogel covering his skin. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice rough. "You were declared deceased," the first alien stated. "And yet, here you are." John gritted his teeth, memories flashing in his mind. Pain, bright lights, the overwhelming sense of slipping away. But now he was very much alive. "What did you do to me?" The aliens hesitated. "We preserved your body for study. Your species' biology should not allow for revival after complete systemic failure." John exhaled sharply, feeling anger bubble beneath his confusion. "You experimented on me?" "No," the second alien corrected. "We observed. And yet you returned." John shivered. Something wasn't right. He could feel it deep in his bones. Then the alarms blared. Chapter 14. Escape from the Void. The sound was deafening. The alien's smooth composure faltered as the emergency lights bathed the room in pulsing red. Symbols flickered across the walls in rapid succession, unreadable to John. One of the aliens turned sharply. "Containment breach." The other specimens. John didn't need to hear more. If there were other prisoners, now was his chance. He forced himself onto his feet, every nerve alight with renewed energy. He didn't understand how he was moving, but instinct drove him forward. The nearest alien attempted to restrain him, but John reacted faster than he thought possible. His hand lashed out, striking the alien's arm, sending the much larger being stumbling back. The others hesitated, their expressions betraying uncertainty. John seized the moment and bolted for the door. The corridors stretched endlessly, illuminated by a cold, blue glow. He could hear shouts in the alien tongue behind him, their footsteps eerily silent against the metallic floor. He turned a corner sharply and nearly crashed into a figure. It wasn't an alien. The woman, human and disheveled, stared at him with wide eyes. "You're alive." John didn't have time for explanations. "We have to go."
"Now."
More alarms sounded, this time interspersed with a deep mechanical voice issuing commands. The ship was locking down. John grabbed the woman's arm, pulling her forward. "I don't understand. How did you survive?" she asked breathlessly as they ran. "Wish I knew," John admitted. "But we need to focus on not dying." Ahead, a large viewport revealed the inky expanse of space. Beyond it, a single vessel loomed, much smaller than the massive alien craft, but unmistakably of human design. A way out. John skidded to a stop at a control panel, frantically scanning the alien symbols. "Can you fly that thing?" he asked the woman. She nodded. "If we can get to it." Footsteps echoed behind them.
"No time."
John slammed his palm against the console, hoping something would work. To his shock, the system responded. The door to the docking bay hissed open. The woman gaped at him. "How did you?" "No idea. Let's go." As they sprinted toward the human ship, John couldn't shake the nagging question in his mind. Why did the ship respond to him? And what had the aliens done to his body?